Welcome to Light Over Heat with Professor David Yamani. The professor is in. I'm here for my office hours to take your questions, so fire away. Welcome back to Office Hours. Today's question comes from Brian Horton on YouTube. He says, why does it seem academia is so monolithically closed-minded about firearms? For an institution that claims the mantle of open-mindedness, curiosity, and rigorous study, this closed-mindedness seems very antithetical. It also seems when this closed-mindedness is illuminated, academia seems not to be bothered by it. So let me answer that question because it's something that I obviously think about quite a lot. I am part and parcel of academia. I've spent basically my life full-time as either a student or as a professor since 1986. Graduate school starting in 91 and my first job in 98. So this is my tribe. I've acquired a secondary tribe or a new tribe since I got involved in gun culture, and it is true that these two tribes do not mix very often. So why do scholars not really get guns? Why do they seem so single-mindedly focused on only one aspect of guns? So I'm going to say that there is in part some ignorance and also perhaps some indifference. And I can relate to this because for the first 40 years of my life, I was also ignorant of guns and quite indifferent to them. They didn't constitute any part of my life, and it was very easy to ignore them. And, ignorance is, seen, I think, in contemporary English as being a harsh word, but by ignorance I mean I simply did not know anything about guns. And I think that this is the reality of a lot of people who end up studying guns, or rather that they understand guns only in part of their complex existence. Guns, as I'll argue in my forthcoming book on Gun Curious, are multifaceted. And the problem is that scholars limit their understanding to only one part, right? There's this huge aspect of the normality of guns and gun owners, and gun scholars tend to focus on the deviant aspects of guns. This is understandable in part because people who become scholars tend not to have a background in firearms. So if you're not a gun owner, you're less likely to know any gun owners, and if you're a non-gun owner in your echo chamber of non-gun owners, as many sociologists for sure and other scholars are, then you actually have less positive feelings about guns and gun owners. And I get this from one of my top 10 books on guns, Mark Joslin's The Gun Gap. He's a political scientist at the University of Kansas. And let me just read part of this chapter of the book on feelings toward gun owners. So he used a survey, and they used this kind of feeling thermometer idea where you give the respondent a group, you ask them how you feel about them from warm to cold on a 100-point scale. And then you can see how different groups of people feel about them. So he finds that non-gun owners expressed significantly less favorable feelings toward gun owners, right? An average of 49 out of 100. A significant percentage of non-owners felt very negatively or cold toward gun owners. And they actually felt colder toward gun owners than some groups which are frequently marginalized in American society, right? So the average feeling thermometer for Muslims was 53. The average feeling thermometer for atheists was 50. For gun owners, there was only one group, apparently, according to what Jocelyn prints here, that was lower than gun owners, and that was NRA members. They come in at 42 on the feeling thermometer scale. So, with the, I think, safe assumption that most scholars are not gun owners, or they at least own guns in much lower percentages than the rest of the population, some of that cold feeling toward gun owners comes through in their scholarship, and not only in terms of how they'll end up analyzing their data, but even more importantly, in terms of the types of questions that are asked, right? And the types of questions you ask going into a study profoundly affect what you're likely to find on the other end. So I think this, idea that gun scholars tend to come from non-gun owning backgrounds and feel colder toward gun owners goes a long way to explaining that. So again, ignorance and indifference leads to this focus on only one part of the entire reality of guns, and that becomes everything in the world of scholarship for the vast majority of people who study guns. Now, I have to say, as I've said sort of many times before, in defense of those who study the negative outcomes with guns exclusively, scholars don't often study what's right about the world. Right? We have within the field of sociology, we study deviance, not normality, right? We study negative, what we would call negative outcomes as opposed to the normal things that people do. The normal things that people do are unmarked, uninteresting, and so fall outside of the realm of scholarship. Now, of course, I've made a big deal about incorporating this broader idea of the normality of guns and gun owners into the field. I'm, sort of a lone voice in the wilderness in a sense, but I hope that my presence within the field does at least require people to put an asterisk by what they say when they do focus only on the negative aspects of guns and gun ownership. But it also, highlights the downside of having sort of single-mindedness in any field of endeavor, whether it's policymaking or scholarship or something else. As Jonathan Haidt argues in The Righteous Mind, we benefit from having a diversity of views approaching a particular issue, right? That he doesn't believe that we can be kind of rational at the individual level, but we can be rational at the collective level, because being involved with people who see the world differently allows us to see the world differently ourselves, right? It helps us to modify our own understandings, to put our sort of intuitions in check, to bring to the level of consciousness our pre-scientific intuitions. And so it would be great if we had more diverse minded people studying the issue. I think that this idea that gun scholars are closed-minded sort of varies from person to person, but I definitely do see it quite a lot. Or for those who recognize that there are normal aspects of guns and gun ownership, it's more of a kind of footnote thing. It's not the primary reality of guns. The primary reality of guns is always what's going wrong with them, or who's doing what badly to whom with them. So, that's a somewhat rambling, but hopefully also somewhat insightful response to your question, Brian. I hope you found it useful. For those of you who may have other questions, or if this raised some additional questions for you, feel free to send them my way. I'll try to answer them as I get them.